Hello everyone, hope everyone is well. It's been a few days. Something on my mind that I wanted to talk about is war, and it's a somber topic, I know, but something that's very dear to me. Dear is probably not the right word, but something that's close to me, relatable. And the reasons for wars are many. A lot of them are not justified. They're made by few people at the top, usually. And the citizens of any region or wherever the war happens are usually ignored because they're the people at the top usually push certain narratives, certain ideas, or their way of thinking, which they consider as right. And the average citizen, average people just get ignored completely, and those ideas or decision making from the top gets imposed on people. Now, the reason why it's dear to me is because of what has happened to the country of my parents, which is Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been caught up with a lot of conflicts. Now, this video is not about Afghanistan. I just want to set the tone about the areas I'm going to cover. So war and the consequences of war that linger for decades. Even when those conflicts and or wars are over, the consequences of those wars are endure for a long time. And usually the effects or the consequences are bad. There, nothing good comes out of war. So number one, the consequences of war, guys. So when war happens, for whatever reasons, I don't want this video to be too long, but when conflict breaks out, war is all about violence. Violence inherently creates an environment which is obviously hostile and also negligent to it's the anti-humanity, so we all know that, but what it specifically promotes is the worst in humanity. The worst comes out in people, not the best. There might be certain cases or incidents of the opposite, but usually it brings the worst. Because once you are in an environment where it's all about you versus me, or them versus us, you cannot expect much reason, dialogue, or understanding each other. It's usually the opposite. I need to get rid of that person. That person is the enemy. They are the enemy. We're better. They're worse. That's the number one environment and mindset that with great regret wins. And war is driven by that mindset. Otherwise, these wars will not happen. So, so the consequences, the ones that stand out based on me studying history, covering wars, or I mean, I shouldn't say covering, I'm not a journalist, but studying wars in anywhere, in whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's the breakup of Yugoslavia, the wars of empires, they usually promotes this mindset that the other, so it relies on demonization of others. Otherwise, you cannot kill someone or be against someone if unless you demonize them, unless you build that hatred from the beginning, which happens slowly. And otherwise, guys, it's impossible to hurt someone unless you just really do not like them. On a personal level, that's different, but we're talking about war, so on a high level, it's the demonization of a group of people needs to happen first. It takes years, and then boom, all the rest follows. So number one consequence that stands out to me the most is the social breakdown, cultural breakdown, humanity, of course, education, progress, all gets suspended, halted, and reversed. So it regresses. So Now I can go on covering each one that I just mentioned, but that's going to be long video. But I just wanted to quickly go over this. And the, well, I don't want to say second. I shouldn't just say first or second. Trauma, guys. Trauma of war, especially on anyone, but especially on kids. Its impacts are lifetime. It's not something you can forget. It's not something you can just move on from. Even if you do, it will linger in your head. Consequences of violence, extreme violence, killing, brutality. It's something that if you witness as a kid, it will be very devastating for your social well-being. Cultural breakdown, whatever culture you have, whether that's music, arts, is gonna get dismantled. And then obviously perpetual violence will linger on. That's something that happens during the actual war and conflict. What follows when that war, I guess in official terms, for the lack of better word, there are post-war consequences as well. Whether when then the one again that usually follows is revenge, right? So if the other side, whatever side that was fighting for their cause or were being fought against, if they I guess in quotes win, and I'll explain what I mean, why I said quotes, they will say, okay, we have to make the other side pay. What happened during war, the killing that happened, that was war. Now we have to really make them pay. The reason why I used quotes, guys, is because nobody wins in war. Everyone loses. The only thing that wins in war is misery, death, brutality, and total breakdown of society. Those are the factors or the things that win in war. Nobody wins. Everyone loses. Everyone creates this lingering, enduring consequences that will go on. Trauma, again, it's big, guys, especially on kids. Not to ignore adults, but on kids, it's devastating, guys. So, I'll give you a specific example on again the country of my parents, Afghanistan. In the 80s and 90s, like obviously the 80s, the Soviets were there. It was a major war, a very brutal conflict. In the 90s, again, Soviets pulled out after 9 years of brutal conflict. The world just said, okay, they're gone. I guess the war is over. Let's just move on. Forget Afghanistan, whatever country that exists, whatever. But the unrest among the people in Afghanistan lingered. Reasons were many. Afghanistan, first of all, is a very diverse country. There are different groups of people, different languages. They all fought a single enemy, which were the invaders, but they had their own deeply rooted differences. And then, so I guess I just don't like to call it civil war. And again, because I see them as a consequence of war itself. But for the sake of, I guess, conventional conversation, we'll just stick with the word civil war. And that lingered. The reason why is Afghanistan was so much saturated with weapons and violence that stuff cannot just come to a halt, guys. That's something that's going to linger. A lot of violence against women, block to block fighting, neighborhood to neighborhood fighting, and a lot of the kids, especially in the 80s and 90s, witnessed a lot of brutality. Now, again, I'm not gonna make this video about Afghanistan, but what I was trying to my main point convey is the trauma on kids. So I did not grow up in the war itself, but I was close to it in Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan shares a border with Afghanistan, and a lot of the Afghans that would come We had a arts class in school, so the teacher would promote expressive art. So meaning she would tell us to just draw anything you want. So a lot of us that were not direct witnesses of war would draw like a sun, a car, uh, our parents holding hands with us, stuff like the house, playground, or Mickey Mouse, stuff like that. But the kids that were around our age, that recently came to the country, guess what they drew? They were drawing AKs, AK-47s. For those of you who are not familiar, that's a Russia. It was invented during the Soviets. It was actually a copy of a German gun, but so they would draw AK-47s. They would draw tanks. They would draw rocket launchers, grenades, and these were kids that were like 9, 10, 11 years old, guys. What kind of 11-year-old draws AKs, tanks, rockets, bombs, mines? There were a lot of mines planted in Afghanistan. So yeah, that's one of them. Imagine what goes on in those kids' heads, and even if they do become adults and outside of the country, that they witnessed war. That's something that will linger and influence them in not so good ways in terms of their marriage, friendships, relationships with people in society. So that's one of the worst consequences of war. Extreme violence against women, using rape as a choice of weapon in war, which happens in a lot of conflicts. Total breakdown of culture, music, arts, which happened in Afghanistan, and the radicalization of mentality of people. That's another thing that happens in war a lot. People usually tend to go to the extreme, not more towards reason, because that's the inherent environment of war, which pushes you there. Again, I was fortunate enough not to be in that kind of environment, but if I was, yeah, I can guarantee myself that I would be radicalized and on the radical side. The chances of me being on that side would be very high. Yeah, that's what I wanted to really cover: the enduring consequences of war and why we should learn from past conflicts. And another good example, well, it's not a good example, but an important one, is Yugoslavia. The breakup of Yugoslavia in the 90s was very brutal, and those consequences still linger. I mean, and another thing, guys, is it takes a generation or more to, in under ideal conditions, to kind of really put this in the books and move forward. And yeah, so Yugoslavia, again, it's another topic, something that people should study. And they're important, guys, because if you have, I don't want anyone to witness war, but I think it's very important for anyone to read about war and what happens in war. I hate glorification of wars. I hate these movies that glorify war or some kind of heroism. That's not what actual war is, guys. There are heroic acts that people do in war, but generally that's not the environment of war. I'm not a complete pacifist. I think there are certain wars that were justified. The one that stands out to me the most in the past 100 years is World War II. That's something that if I was around back then, if I would have participated and died in, I think it would have been well deserved or worth it for many reasons. But all the other wars, guys, if you look at their origins, they're bad. They were based on egos, certain narratives that leaders pushed on millions of people, and extremely wrong. You cannot call war the right war. There's no such thing. They're all bad. They're all wrong. If fighting does break out, it's very hard, guys, to stick to reason. And because even if you are a very decent person, the environment of war will make it very challenging and hard for you to stay that way, that you would be in an environment that's not filled with violence and radical mentality and demonization. That's it, guys. I know it was a somber topic, but again, this channel is all about sharing my experiences and my knowledge. And also another reason that these issues are important is because I grew up among vets, and talking to them a lot. So in Uzbekistan, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, we used to just talk to Afghan war veterans that served in Afghanistan. Mind you, guys, for some reason it's called the Russian War. It was actually a Soviet Union, and Soviet Union was comprised of 14 nations, and a lot of soldiers were sent from different countries that were not Russians. And so there were Russians in Uzbekistan, but there were Uzbeks that served in that war. There were Turkmen from Turkmenistan. There were Tajiks that were sent to that war because they were all part of the same military, the Soviet 40th Army that was sent there, along with the Air Force and everything else. Yes, there were many Russians, there were many Ukrainians that served in the Afghan war that were sent there, and a lot of people from the Central Asian republics were sent there as well. So as a kid, I didn't have the maturity to interpret this stuff. I was just more interested. I always liked airplanes, fighter jets. So in the Soviet Union, MiGs and Sukhois, Sus were like the state-of-the-art aircrafts, and the MIL helicopters. I don't know if you probably guys seen the Mi-24 or the Mi-17, MIL 17. So I would ask these guys like about those. And one thing that I remembered, but I didn't understand at that time. I was like under 10, and that was that they were very at the time I called them grumpy, but they were very disturbed, and because of the violence that they witnessed that happened to their comrades, or the violence that they inflicted on Afghans in the villages. Again, like I said, it was a brutal war, and so they wouldn't talk to me about, they would be like, you know what, I was not a pilot. I don't know much about this stuff. I don't want to talk about this. Now, obviously, many of you, and me included, will say that, obviously, because I was too young, but they wouldn't even talk about this stuff with my older brother or my dad, and with other people. And even when I went back to visit, because my dad is buried in Uzbekistan, so I was 27 back in 26, 27 back in 2016, 2015. Actually, sorry, 2015 was when I went back. I was 26. Yeah, my math is right. So again, some of them were still alive, and they still didn't want to talk about it. Some would, and they were the only thing they would always tell me is that, yeah, it's a lot of stuff, a lot of bad things happened. We did a lot of bad things, and then they would just stop. And I could tell their eyes and their faces would turn. And then when I came to America, I would talk to vets, Vietnam war veterans, and also Iraq and then Afghanistan when they would come back. Those guys were also not somber. They were not well. They were somber mentally. Just the amount of violence and killing and death that they witnessed. And yeah, so those are my personal experiences and knowledge. And that's it, guys. I know it's somber, but these are important topics that I think we need to talk about and know. All right, guys, be well, be safe. Until next time.